back in the collector's attic again, and we're up here screwing around, showing you stuff.
Everything.
Last week, if you recall, we looked at a Breckenridge, a Delton brass locomotive, the very first one that they did, and it was their goal ultimately to try to do an affordable engine and to go into wide production on stuff similar to what LGB was doing, but at more affordable prices. In spite of the fact that the brass engines were really, really expensive at like $1,800, to buy a LGB engine, a plastic LGB engine would set you back for one of the really nice ones, $1,000 in 1980s money.
Oh.
And they wanted to come out with something more in about a $400 range.
There you go.
That was a true American prototype. LGB was just kind of, they were okay. I mean, they did come out with a really nice Mogul locomotive. It was decent, but they wanted to come out with something on the level of the brass engines that they were doing in plastic, mass-produced, and very affordable. And they did.
Oh.
This is the locomotive that they came up with. And this is Denver and Rio Grande Western C16. Good choice of engines. So the C16, it's a little dusty, but it's got the same quality of paint job and whatnot that you would have seen on their brass engines, and yet, mass produced, again in the United States. And
Fuzzy.
this one is locomotive 268, which I think is one of the surviving 16s. At any rate, they did a real early version. They wanted it to look 19th century because that was the era that they'd been doing in the brass engines. And to a large extent, you can't tell this from one of their brass engines. It's got brass detail, it's got a plastic boiler and a plastic frame and so on. But it did sell for the target price of around $450, way less than an LGB. You set it down on the track and it took off and it ran for about 6 feet, and then it melted the gears. So the initial run had some problems, and sadly that really dealt them a death blow. They kept trying to get this thing dialed in, but there were some mechanism problems. The gears would melt, the engine mounts would melt. They came out with brass engine mounts, and you had to retrofit your engine. And let's pull the tender up here as well. But just a beautiful paint job. They also released a later version of this. There's one of them knocking around in here somewhere.
Better look for it.
I've seen it. I see it right now. It's sitting right there. Which was just done to the coal burning later version, but this is the one that they did as the wood burning version. And looking at the Breckenridge and looking at this has almost the same level of detail and quality of the Breckenridge. And you just had to confront the fact that if you bought one of those very early versions, which this one is, you had to get new motor mounts for it, and you had to do those things. But trying to mass produce a locomotive like this really stressed the Delton company. And eventually it put them out of business. They kept trying to add more and more to their line, and the very last thing they did was a passenger train, a Colorado and Southern passenger train, 4 cars, and they borrowed a lot of money to get that on the market. All 4 cars are up here somewhere. I buy everything that comes along, what can I say? At any rate, they couldn't pay back the loan, and it eventually bankrupted the company. And the fact that this locomotive had so many mechanical issues, and they had to recall hundreds of them, if not thousands of them, and put new motor mounts in them and so on. The company just ran into some significant challenges, and eventually the bankrupt company, not the passenger cars, the passenger car molds were put up for auction, and nobody wanted them, and I don't know what happened to them. They were never re-released.
Oh, wow.
Somewhere in the world those molds exist. You can find those Colorado and Southern passenger cars on the market, but they were never put back on the market. The rest of the Delton line was picked up by the Polk brothers, Nat and his brother, with their company AccuCraft. Originally it was Polk Hobbies,
right.
and then it became, not AccuCraft, that's the brass company. That's those guys over there. Aristocraft. They called their company Aristocraft, and this came out as the Aristocraft engine. And as far as I know, this is still on the market. That company's gone through reorganization and bankruptcy and whatnot, all challenged. And maybe this little guy's a jinx to people, I don't know. But at any rate, the Polk Hobbies and Aristo did release this in both versions, the modern version and the later version, and without the mechanical issues. So if you're looking for one, they're available. You can find them in the hobby shops, you can find them on eBay. If you go shopping, you might want to even try to avoid buying one of these early ones unless you just like the history. But the early ones come in a box that looks like this. And if it comes in a box that looks like this, you want to check the motor mounts and whatnot and make sure that it's... Because a lot of these were bought just as a shelf toy.
Yeah.
And never run, and as soon as you try driving it down the tracks, your gears are going to come loose and your engine mount's going to melt and the whole thing's going to come to an abrupt and immediate halt. At any rate, there it is, the Delton C16. Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, do pop on over to the channel, and if you haven't subscribed, you want to subscribe.
Sure, absolutely.
Because subscribing is cool. And the easy way to do both is to use the blue button. You want to do the honors? Zoink! Right there is a blue button that says subscribe. If you don't see it, it's perhaps not supported on your phone or your device. But you can get over there by just going over to the channel.
Easy.
Easy peasy. Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here again on Sunday with the Driving Around Show. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.